Good morning and welcome to the daily weather operations brief. This morning we are once again seeing some very dense fog across the local area with reduced visibilities as a result, coming in below a quarter mile at times, especially here on the base. And for today, we are looking at a good chance of seeing some rain and thunderstorms move through with some potentially damaging winds. And while we did have some intermittent gusty conditions overnight and in the early mornings, we have since been sitting in a lull as of the past few hours. So we did drop out of a wind advisory, but within the next hour or two, we'll likely see an upwards trend in those winds and bring us back close to, at the very least, seeing another wind advisory go out. For today's morning surface analysis chart here, we can see that we are currently under a warm front that is pushing up through the mid-Atlantic region, and that is connected to a strong area of low pressure sitting out west. And as a result, that low pressure is drawing in quite the surge of warm and moist air due to those southerly winds that are expected to be on the increase here in the next few hours. And as a result, we'll see a tightening pressure gradient moving through the day today, which will drive those winds upwards of 40 plus knots as we move into the afternoon. And when that system continues moving eastwards, we'll also see a cold front associated with it bring in those rain chances by mid-afternoon, along with that potential for thunderstorms and those elevated winds to gust even higher than 40 knots during that frontal passage. Currently, much of the region, as mentioned earlier, is under a warm front, and we are seeing scattered showers as a result across much of the mid-Atlantic. This will likely be the case until we see that cold front come through. Looking around 4 o'clock to see the highest chances of that rainfall, that heavy rainfall at that, and those thunderstorm chances. And then from 4 p.m. onwards to roughly 9, we'll see those conditions conducive for convective activity, but then we'll see a gradual tapering of those degraded conditions, and we'll see improving conditions along with maybe some lingering showers on the back end of the system, which should largely have pushed out by 2 a.m. tomorrow morning. Looking at our current weather conditions out on the field, we do have a vertical visibility of 200 feet and a quarter statute mile of visibility. Winds are out of the south, roughly around 14 knots and gusting occasionally up to 24. However, as mentioned earlier, it has been quite intermittent on those gusty periods. Again, expecting to see those on the rise. Temperatures currently sitting in the low 50s, and we are quite saturated with a relative humidity of 100%, hence the dense fog across the area. Now, looking at this morning's satellite imagery on one of the more recent scans, we can see that cloud cover and those low-level clouds largely over much of the mid-Atlantic, and off to the west we do see that more so dense cloud cover. That is the cold front that is pushing into the area. We'll start to see that denser cloud cover move in over the next few hours, and once we move into the afternoon, and that is what is going to be bringing in those rain chances, which we can see here, that line of storms pushing through. And around 4 p.m. is when we see our best chances of that rain and those thunderstorms beginning. And then they'll move through, and we'll see a secondary line push through, should be lighter in nature. And then on the back end, we'll see cooler temperatures and clearing skies in preparation for the next day, in which we anticipate partly to mostly cloudy conditions. We'll touch on that here in a second. And for our 24-hour risk chart, we do have quite a bit of cover. We're under a chance of seeing rain for a majority of the 24 hours ahead, gradually increasing conditions today as we move into the afternoon, into the early evening hours when we see our best chances of rain and thunderstorms. We'll also see those windy conditions and a wind advisory almost certainly being issued at this point as we move through the day, with winds gusting upwards of 40 knots at times. And we'll also see those lowered ceilings for a majority of the day as well, especially during the passage of that frontal feature. And rainfall could be heavy at times, hard to get a read on it, but it really depends on where those convective systems end up moving through. And then on the back end, we'll see improving sky conditions and winds on the decline, in which they might be lingering, which we'll touch on here. On Tuesday, expecting partly to mostly cloudy conditions and the potential for seeing some lingering winds, especially early in the day, but again should be on the decreasing side of things, and a high in the low 40s, greens across the board. Tuesday night, partly cloudy and a low of 28, well below average, and greens across the board. And for Wednesday, mostly cloudy and a high of 39, again below average, but greens across the board for operational risks. And that is going to conclude the daily weather operations brief. Be back at 10 o'clock with the 7-day outlook. Hope everyone has a wonderful day.